This story happened at an amusement park my friends and I visit every year. Every summer we drive down to the shore and stay there for a few days. Right along the beach there's a huge amusement park with dozens of rides, games, and food stands. Whenever we go, my friends and I try to stay at the park as late as possible. It closes at midnight, and almost every night we're there until the very last minute. But one night in particular is something I'll never forget. That night, my best friend dared me to go talk to the psychic in the park. Near the back of the boardwalk, there was a small fortune-telling stand. It had a faded sign outside that said things like palm readings and know your future. Honestly, nobody ever went there. Most people walked right past it on their way to the rides because it was kind of boring compared to everything else. But since it was a dare, I agreed. I didn't want to look like a coward in front of my friends. The truth is, I had never believed in any of that spiritual or psychic stuff anyway. My plan was honestly just to mess around with the guy for a bit and see what he would say. So I started walking towards the stand while my friends followed behind me. When we got there, I saw an older man sitting in a chair behind a small wooden table. He was quietly reading a book under a dim light. When he noticed us standing there, he looked up. "Well, hello there," he said calmly. I sat down across from him and asked, half joking, "So, can you predict my future?" The second I said that, my friends started laughing at me. They were clearly expecting the guy to say something ridiculous. But the man didn't seem bothered at all. He simply closed his book and nodded. "Yes, follow me." He gestured towards a curtain behind the stand that led to a small back room. For a moment I hesitated. Something about the place suddenly felt uncomfortable. But since my friends were watching, I went anyway. They stayed outside while I followed the man behind the curtain. Inside, the room was barely lit. The only light came from a small lamp sitting on a table. In the center of the room, there was a single chair. The whole setup honestly looked like something straight out of a cheap horror movie. Still, I sat down and waited. The man slowly walked over to a table and picked up a crystal ball, the kind you always see in the movies. He placed it in front of him and stared into it silently. I remember trying not to laugh, because I assumed he was about to tell me some generic fortune teller nonsense. But after a few seconds, his expression changed. His face became serious. Then he said something that immediately made my stomach drop. "Something tragic is gonna happen to you tonight." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. I stared at him, trying to figure out if he was joking, but he didn't smile. Instead, he leaned slightly closer and said in a quieter voice, "If I were you, I would be very careful tonight." At that point, I had completely lost the urge to joke around. I suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable being in that room, so I quickly stood up. Thanks," I muttered before walking out. My friends were waiting outside, and the second I stepped out, they started asking how it went. Let's just get out of here," I told them. "I don't want to be anywhere near that psychic stand anymore." Even though I knew it was probably fake, what he said stuck in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about it. For the next few minutes, I kept wondering the same thing over and over. What did he mean by something tragic? Was I actually in danger? Eventually, my friends convinced me that the guy was just trying to scare people. They told me fortune tellers say stuff like that all the time. After a while, I started calming down. We went back to walking around the amusement park and riding different rides like normal. And honestly, I started forgetting about the whole thing. Everything felt normal again. Until we decided to ride one of the roller coasters. We waited in line for a few minutes until it was finally our turn to board. But just as we were about to get on, the ride suddenly stopped working. The operators told everyone there was a small malfunction and that they needed to check the ride to make sure everything was safe. So we waited. About 10 minutes later, they reopened the ride. People started getting back on the coaster, including us. I sat down in one of the seats and pulled the safety bar down. The ride operators began checking everyone's restraints, and right before the coaster was about to take off, I suddenly remembered what the psychic had said earlier. Something tragic is going to happen to you tonight. A horrible feeling hit my stomach. Without really thinking, I stood up and got off the ride. My friends looked confused. "Dude, what are you doing?" one of them asked. I told them I had a bad feeling and that we should wait. Somehow I managed to convince them to get off too. Then I told the ride operator that they should probably send the coaster for a test run before letting people ride again. He seemed a little annoyed, but he ultimately agreed. So they sent the empty cart up the track. What happened next still gives me chills to this day. As the coaster reached one of the turns, the car suddenly malfunctioned again. This time it completely derailed from the track and dropped about 10 feet down onto the maintenance area below. Everyone watching went completely silent. If that cart had been full of people, it would have been tragic. We would have been on it too. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. That accident could have been the tragic event the psychic was warning me about. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. And I still can't decide whether what the psychic said was just a coincidence, or if somehow he really did know something terrible was about to happen. When I was younger, I loved exploring abandoned places. During my childhood, my friends and I were always trying to find new locations around town. Old buildings, empty houses, anything that looked creepy enough to explore. The best abandoned spot in our town was this small rundown house on the edge of the woods. We had explored it dozens of times. But one night we heard about something way better. An abandoned amusement park a couple of towns away. At the time we were all 15 years old, but none of us had cars or driver licenses. The only way we can get there was by riding our bikes. We also planned to go late at night. Our thinking was that it would be easier to sneak into the park without being caught. Usually abandoned places still had security guards patrolling them just to keep teenagers from breaking in. The bike ride surprisingly only took about 15 minutes. We followed the GPS on my phone, which eventually led us to a narrow dirt path that disappeared into the woods. It was completely dark and quiet out there. But we assumed it had to be the right way because we were already in the middle of nowhere. After walking our bikes down the trail for a few minutes, the trees suddenly opened up into a clearing. And that's when we saw it, the amusement park. Even in the dark, we could tell the place was huge. There were probably around 15 different rides, massive buildings, and tons of structures scattered across the property. From where we stood, I could see the silhouette of a large roller coaster towering over everything. It honestly felt surreal, seeing that whole park just sitting there abandoned. But something about the place felt off. "Let's just play it safe for now," one of my friends said quickly. "It's kinda weird we haven't seen anyone." He was right. Not a single person, no security guards, no lights, there was nothing. It was just us. My friends agreed, and we slowly started walking towards one of the old roller coasters. Obviously the ride wasn't working anymore, but my idea was to climb the tracks up to the top just to see the view of the park. And because we were dumb teenagers, everyone agreed. We carefully climbed our way up the metal tracks until we were probably about 30 feet in the air. From up there, we could see almost the entire amusement park. Everything was completely still. Then suddenly, my friend James whispered sharply, "Everyone shut up, there's a guy." He pointed down towards a building near what looked like an old bowling alley. I looked down and saw a man walking across the park. He was dressed entirely in black clothing and was wearing some kind of mask. Luckily, he hadn't noticed us, but none of us wanted to move. We just stayed completely silent as we watched him walk around the park for a moment before eventually entering one of the buildings. The second he disappeared inside, we started climbing down the roller coaster tracks as fast as we could. Once we reached the ground, we cautiously walked over towards the bowling alley building to see if the man was still there. We peeked inside, but we couldn't see him anywhere. At that point, we weren't sure if he was a security guard or just some random person exploring like we were. Since the building looked empty, we decided to keep exploring the park for a little longer. As we walked towards the far side of the amusement park, I suddenly started hearing something faint. It was music. At first I thought I was imagining it, but the longer we stood there, the clearer it became. It sounded like old circus music. I remember feeling confused because the entire place was supposed to be abandoned. Nothing should have been working, so why was there music playing? Instead of leaving like we probably should have, we decided to follow the sound. The closer we got, the louder it became. Eventually we saw where it was coming from. A small building near the edge of the park. There were flickering lights shining through the windows. We stopped just outside the entrance, and that's when James had the worst idea possible. Before any of us could stop him, he yelled into the building, "Hello? Is anyone in there? We're just exploring. We're coming in." I immediately turned to him. "Why would you say that?" I whispered angrily. Now anyone inside definitely knew we were there. but when no one responded, we assumed the building was empty. So James decided to lead the way inside. The second we stepped through the doorway, I noticed how dark it was. The only light inside came from a small fire burning on the floor, and that's when I saw them. A group of people sitting in the corner of the room. There were probably 5 or 6 of them. They were all wearing black clothing, and every single one of them was staring directly at us. One of them slowly stood up, and he was wearing a strange mask, the same mask the man outside had been wearing. None of us said a word. We just all turned and ran as fast as we could. I honestly can't explain how fast we sprinted out of that building, across the entire amusement park, and back through the dark woods. Branches were hitting our faces as we ran, but none of us cared. We didn't stop until we reached our bikes. The second we got on them, we pedaled as fast as we could all the way back to town. None of us spoke during the ride. To this day, I still have no idea who those people were, or what they were doing in that abandoned amusement park in the middle of the night. But one thing is certain, we definitely weren't supposed to find them. This story happened a couple of years ago, during the clown epidemic that was spreading all across the United States. Most of you probably remember it. Back in 2016, there was countless reports of people dressing up as killer clowns and going around scaring kids and random people in public. At first it started as a stupid prank, but eventually some people began taking it way too far. There were videos online of clowns carrying machetes, chainsaws, and knives. Some were even chasing people through parks and neighborhoods. At the time of this story, I was 16 years old, and weirdly enough, I actually wanted to see one of those killer clowns. I know that sounds crazy now, but I didn't believe any of it. I thought the entire thing was just a huge internet hoax or people exaggerating stories for attention. That was until the night of the fair. It was a warm evening for late October when my town hosted its annual fall fair. The fair was always a huge deal for us because there was literally nothing else to do where we lived. I swear we had to be living in one of the most boring towns in the entire country. My plan was to go around 8 p.m., right when the sun started setting. Everyone knew the fair was way better at night when all the lights came on. I called 2 of my friends, who I'll call Steve and Jaden for privacy reasons, and told them the plan. They were both down immediately. After school that day, they came over to my house and we just hung out for a couple of hours until it started getting dark. Eventually we headed out on foot. The fairgrounds were only about 10 minutes from my house, so the walk there wasn't bad at all. When we arrived, the place was already packed. Music was blasting from different rides, kids were running around everywhere, and the smell of fried food was in the air. We walked straight to the ticket booth and bought ride passes. My goal was to go on as many rides as possible, but there was one attraction I was especially interested in. A clown-themed haunted house. It was implemented this year. Since Halloween was right around the corner, the fair organizers had decided to add a haunted attraction for the first time that year. A lot of parents had actually complained about the idea because of the clown epidemic that had been happening, but we honestly didn't care. If anything, it made us more excited. The first ride we went on was the Ferris wheel, mainly because we wanted to take pictures of the entire fair from the top. When our cart finally reached the very top, the ride paused for a moment. From up there, we could see the entire fairgrounds glowing with lights. In the distance, the clown haunted house stood out from everything else. It was designed to look like an old 2-story house, covered in giant clown decorations and flashing red lights. Jaden pointed down at it. "That actually looks pretty cool, bro," he said. Steve nodded. "Yeah, that's definitely the creepiest thing here." I turned to them and asked, "You guys want to go straight there after this?" They both agreed immediately. Once the ride started moving again and we got off, we headed straight towards the haunted house. Standing in front of it honestly gave me chills. There was a huge poster of a clown face stretched across the front of the building, with exaggerated teeth and glowing red eyes. 2 workers dressed as clowns stood near the entrance scanning tickets. But the creepiest part wasn't any of that. It was the upstairs window. There was a clown standing there. He wasn't moving. He was just staring directly at me. Something about it felt off, to say the least. Normally, actors in haunted houses are supposed to jump out and scare people, but this guy wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there in the window, watching. Still, I tried to brush it off. I walked up to the entrance and handed our passes to the workers. One of the clowns scanned them and gestured for us to go inside. Before we entered, the other clown explained something. "If you get too scared, just clap your hands," he said through the mask. "That signals the actors to stop and escort you out." We nodded and stepped inside. The moment we entered, I could hear creepy carnival-style music playing faintly through the house. The hallway was dimly lit with flashing lights and fog machines. It honestly felt pretty convincing. We had barely taken 10 steps when a clown suddenly jumped out from behind a stack of boxes and screamed in our faces. All three of us jumped. The clown laughed and disappeared into another hallway. We kept moving. A few more jump scares happened as we made our way through the first floor. After a couple minutes, we reached the staircase that led up to the second floor. I went up first, but the moment I turned the corner at the top of the stairs, I froze. Standing in the hallway was a clown. He was blocking the entire path. It was the same clown I had seen in the upstairs window earlier. He was just standing there, and he was staring at us. In his hand, he was holding a machete. At first I thought it was fake, but something about it didn't look like a prop. Steve whispered nervously, I thought they weren't allowed to have weapons." "That's what the sign outside said," Jaden replied quietly. Trying to stay calm, Jaden spoke up. Sir, we just need to get through. We'll just pass by you." The clown didn't move. Instead, he slowly raised the machete into the air, like he was about to swing it. My heart started pounding. I quickly clapped my hands, remembering what the worker had told us. Nothing happened. The clown didn't react, he just kept staring at us. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. "Run!" The second I said that, the clown charged at us. We turned and sprinted down the stairs as fast as we could. I could hear heavy footsteps behind us as we ran through the first floor and burst out the front exit. We didn't stop running until we reached a nearby security area. Completely out of breath, we told the guard everything that had just happened. At first he looked skeptical, but when he saw how shaken we were, he took it seriously. He walked us back to the haunted house and called over the manager. We described the clown in as much detail as we could. We told him the costume he was wearing, the mask, and the machete he was holding. As we were talking, the manager's expression slowly changed. His eyes widened. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "There's no one working here that's dressed like that." For a moment, none of us said anything. That's when it hit me. Someone had snuck into the haunted house dressed like a clown. And because of the clown epidemic happening at the time, no one questioned it. The security guard immediately shut down the attraction and searched the entire building. But the worst part is they never found him. To this day, I still have no idea who that person was or what his intentions were. But one thing I know for sure is that if we hadn't run when we did, that night at the fair could have ended a lot worse.